In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Brent Grant, joined as always by JB. On this episode of the podcast, we're going to break down some of the cuts that were made this past week. A couple shockers, some that JB and I kind of felt were coming, and yeah, some that were just out of the blue, and a lot that really upset some people because there were some fan favorites in there. So we're going to deal with that entire topic. We're also going to start looking forward to the Hamilton exhibition game this week, or preseason game, I should say. I know everyone hates when I call it exhibition game. Preseason game this week in Guelph. And some of the positional battles we're going to be tuned into, and perhaps some of the movement that we may see after this game and what this game in general is going to look like. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. How are you doing with cuts? Are you feeling okay? I know the Twitterverse was up in arms on the weekend when fan favorites like Toshiki Sato, Chandler Worthy, Antonio Pipkin, Tristan Deku were released. Are you good?
I am. I think that that probably doesn't surprise people. I think that look, these are all logical cuts. From a defensive back point of view, I thought Deku was pretty good last year, but with the number of new guys they've signed, I think the seventh best defensive back position is filled, so it makes sense. I think he'll catch on somewhere. I thought he definitely flashed talent last year. Kicker wise, we knew once the Aussie came in that was probably going to be it. But I think that he has a very good chance of re-signing on the practice squad.
Just going back to Deku for a second before we get to Toshi. Deku, I thought was terrific last year, and he was one of the guys that I felt had a real shot at cracking the starting lineup this year, because I felt like he was a starting caliber player that we probably had projected on the bench. I think we projected him as sort of first man off the bench, and then you had a couple guys come in like Tavares McFadden, who was better, and then you also got some really good play from D'Angelo Amos, and we expect big things from Deshaun Amos, who's signed in the offseason. And so you're right. All it took is then Maurice Carnell IV playing out of his mind in the double blue game, and suddenly it didn't look so good for Tristan Deku. But I am surprised that he hasn't been picked up yet, because a couple of these guys have been picked up and were picked up almost immediately. What do you think it is about him that has him still out there? Because I don't really get it. I would, for sure, there are 5 teams that I think right now should pick up Deku.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that both BC or Ottawa didn't take him. I don't know. I mean, I know if you look at his film, there were definitely, like any, non-starter per se, there were busts. I wouldn't say that my film study of Deku is exhaustive, but I agree. He flashed enough for me in those games, certainly to be worthy of a roster spot for somebody. So I am, really surprised. I don't know if he's rethinking, or if he's not sure what he wants to do, or if he's holding out and hoping maybe a team a little higher up the food chain shows some interest in him. I don't know what his situation is, but I would be shocked if he wasn't signed, because I agree with you. I think he is a rosterable talent. I think it just speaks to how deep the Argos defensive backfield is, and they've brought in a couple of twitchy new guys who just kind of squeezed him out, and at the end of the day, they're not going to keep 10 defensive backs.
Based on his tweets, I think he just wants to play. I think he wants to sign, and I think he would sign anywhere where he feels like he has a chance to play, because I think he wants to prove that he's a starter. He certainly believes he is, and I do too. So I think hopefully it's only a matter of time. But yeah, I'd love to see him out there. Well, so let's talk about Toshiki Sato. We love the guy, and everyone does, and that's why this one was such a hard cut. There were so many when we posted the cuts list. there were so many people who responded with just simply no exclamation mark because, he'd won so many people over. He was just, so generous with his time. Really endeared himself to fellow players, to fans, to coaches. Nobody had a bad thing to say about him. And he went out there and, he was the first guy on, last guy off as well. He was, getting in his time among the more entertaining people to watch him practice too. I loved, last year just watching he and Beatty and Reinhardt together were, part of my favorite parts of practice. But yeah, like you said, with now having Haggerty, the punter, as well as Beatty, the field goal kicker, I still think I think the Argos need a practice roster kicker. I just don't think you can go into the season without somebody there because you really don't want Haggerty handling field goal duties. And so if something does happen to Beatty and he's starting to get older, you don't really have an answer. And I know kicker you can kind of bring in and throw into the situation. It's not the same as someone learning a playbook. But we saw last year, teams had a heck of a time trying to replace kickers all around the league. Winnipeg, went through like a dozen kickers trying to find the right guy, and they still had issues. So I really hope he signs back in Toronto. I guess I hope he gets a job somewhere else. Like that would be ideal because I think he deserves it. But if he doesn't, I hope he's back on the Toronto practice squad. It's just unusual. In this round of cuts, you don't typically see a lot of these guys come back to practice squad. That's usually the next round's cuts that end up on the practice squad. So I'm a little nervous about that, but I just feel like there needs to be another kicker on this team.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for Sato, it's probably in kind of the cold, harsh light of day. He was probably told, keep in shape and, don't stay by the phone. And, where in essence, he's not on the practice squad, but if somebody gets hurt, they're going to give him a call. Now, whether he goes back to Japan or not, probably will, that's probably a conversation he'll have to have is he going to hang out and not actually be on the practice squad, or will he return to Japan? So it'll be interesting to see. They may have cut him early. For other teams might give him a look. Sometimes an early cut can be a generous thing, for other teams. I thought his kicks looked good. So, maybe he has a better chance of being picked up with an early cut. So, that's the way I would look at it. I think we talked about it. We weren't crazy about how he was treated in that Edmonton game, but I hope he gets a look, but it's tough. I mean, it's a tough racket. He's a fine kicker, but that's about it, right? So is that going to be enough to attract a contract? I don't know. I don't think so, probably.
Well, hopefully he is, if at the very least, back in Toronto, because it would be great to see him out there 100%. Again. And I do think, like you said, that this organization is class all the time. And I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, that some of these guys were let go early because they knew it was an inevitability that at best they're back on the practice squad. And so they thought, well, let's see if a team will pick them up and give them another shot, because we've already seen a couple of people have. And let's get to a couple of those guys. So we might have buried the lead here with Antonio Pipkin. We weren't really surprised about this because we had sort of pretty much immediately thought that this was going to be Chad Kelly's job. I don't know, though, if I thought Pipkin would be getting released in this round, mind you. I didn't think it would be that early because the Argos, they only have a couple of quarterbacks on the roster now. You're basically leaving the team with three quarterbacks. I don't know if there was any time last year where there were three quarterbacks on the roster. They had 4 and 5 most of the season. You're just putting yourself in a strange situation. So I would expect the Argos to bring somebody in. But right now it's McLeod Bethel-Thompson. And then if something happens to him, and we saw at the Double Blue game how bandaged up he was, it's Chad Kelly's show if something happens, and then it's Austin Simmons and there's no one else left. So that's probably an area where they're looking. But I guess they felt maybe Pipkin could have another shot in BC. They had a quarterback injury. They jump all over it and they sign him. And, good for Antonio Pipkin. I wish him well. I hope he Hope he sees some success out there. He's a good quarterback. It makes sense that he wasn't in the cards here. The way I view it, and this is my own interpretation of what the coaches have said about this transaction. Antonio Pipkin has been in Toronto for a year. He's not new to the system. And in that year, he hasn't shown a ton of improvement, a little bit, but it hasn't been leaps and bounds. And my reading of the situation is that the coaching staff looked at this and they're like, look, he's been here for a year. This is what he is. This basically is his floor and his ceiling. And Chad Kelly came in and in a week showed visible improvement. And they're just looking at these two guys and they're like, well, in a month's time, Chad Kelly's going to be well past him if he isn't already. And so it just made sense, and probably financial sense too. So that move, the timing of it may surprise me just because I didn't think we'd be left with three quarterbacks, but the move makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think we talked about it. Pipkin is clearly the better backup. And if you need a guy to come in the fourth quarter and because of an injury and keep the ship heading in the right direction, well, he is the better choice than Kelly. There is a risk there because, I don't think Chad Kelly, in my opinion, is probably ready to be a backup quarterback in the CFL. But, on the other hand, you look at it and you think, really, what are we going to do? Like if Pipkin starts 8 games, well, I mean, this kind of, we're folding our cards anyways. So, let's just go with the kid and give him more snaps and more reps and see how that goes. So I can see the argument against it, but I like it. I give the kid more snaps, see what you have.
Yeah, and I like him. Everything I've seen has been a positive. The leadership too, even just seeing that, he's the guy breaking down the team after Coach Dinwiddie's speech after the Ottawa game, things like that speak very highly. Now I know a lot of the guys that would normally be doing that weren't dressed for that game. I think that's largely why, but still, he's the guy that's stepping in to do that. He's a leader and he looks the part out there and he's getting better every practice. And I'm excited to see him this week in Guelph against Hamilton because I think he'll take another couple steps. Let's talk about Chandler Worthy. This is a tough one for me because Chandler Worthy has one of those elements that you can't teach, which is unreal speed. And we've talked about before how this hasn't, for some reason, translated into the CFL game. But the fact is, this is a 4.2 guy. This is one of the fastest players in the league. And you always get nervous releasing a guy like that. And you knew, of course, he was going to get picked up immediately because everyone else looks around. It's not like there's handfuls of 4.2 guys just sitting there. And so Montreal picks him up. I get why he's released. Part of me really hates it, though.
I think it's Deku all over again. We talked about it. He was clearly the odd man out with the new guys they brought in. I think they felt like they had twitchier, higher ceiling guys than Worthy. I think it's very much a Pipkin cut. This guy's fine. He is a CFL roster talent level player. But at the end of the day, you're like, if this is who he is, well, we feel like we can have somebody else. Because really, if you're looking at the bottom of your depth chart, you're looking for somebody there with a high ceiling. You don't need your 8th wide receiver to be who he is, right? You're looking for a guy there who, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. I think that just makes more sense to have that at the bottom of your rosters to keep guys who, maybe don't turn into anything, but maybe really do, as opposed to a guy where, Worthy got, I thought, plenty of shots, and it just, whether the offensive coordinator just wasn't feeling it, or, he just never turned into the weapon that he might have been. So I'm behind that. I think it's a tough cut, but I think it's a logical cut.
The way I look at Chandler Worthy is because everyone was, looking at Lucky Whitehead in BC and said, well, why can't, those guys are basically the same speed. How come one is breaking games wide open and we're having trouble getting the ball to Worthy? And, we looked last year, like, let's get him involved in punt return, kick return. Let's get him quick screens and jets. And it just, nothing was there. If you look down south at Tyreek Hill and John Ross, that to me is a similar comparison. So you got Tyreek Hill and John Ross, two of the fastest players in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, a game breaker who has, not single-handedly, but certainly helped get his team to Super Bowl appearances, was, one of the biggest difference makers on the field. John Ross, who is faster, just couldn't get it done with Cincinnati, couldn't get it done with New York, and you're sort of at a loss. You're saying, well, this guy runs so quickly. How come we can't find a way to get him involved? But it's because there's more to football than just track speed. And the thing that Worthy and Ross both have in common is that while they are incredibly fast, they have never looked quite that fast on the football field. And they have never really blown anyone away that way. So it's a similar thing. I'm hoping for him. I like Chandler Worthy quite a lot. I hope he makes it in Montreal. It's tough to say that because I kind of don't also, because I just don't want Montreal to be any good. But for him personally, I'd love to see it work because he's worked really hard. And, as much as I hate former Argos coming back to haunt us because so many seem to, I am pulling for him. Some of the other names, we saw Solomon Ajay, Jake Foshee, Drez Anderson, who got into a couple games last year, receiver, but same thing with Chandler Worthy. There just wasn't a spot this year. Kendall Futrell, defensive lineman, who, we weren't sure what we were expecting from him. He had trouble getting on the field in Ottawa last year, so expectations weren't hugely high. Asnel Robo, I was really sad to see, and I hope he's picked up somewhere else. He's such a valuable global player. He's someone I got to know fairly well. It was my first ever interview in French that I conducted. If you didn't get a chance to see that, you can see that on our YouTube page. I ran the entire interview in French and realized very quickly that I don't know football French as well as I know conversational French, but he was very polite and walked me through it. But yeah, he was a guy I was really sad to see go. He'll probably get picked up somewhere because as a global player, his value is high, and he's been a special teams contributor from the word go, going all the way back to Calgary. And then the last guy we should talk about is Brady Sheldon, who got picked up almost immediately by Edmonton. Brady Sheldon has NFL experience. He's got those measurables. He's a huge individual, but we just weren't that impressed with his play last week, and that may have been the final coffin there. You graded the linebackers as a unit as having failed.
Yeah,
and so
I mean.
Yeah.
I didn't think the linebacker play was very strong at all, especially from the MAC. I thought it was slow. I thought there were gaps. I didn't feel like it worked well with the defensive linemen. There was certainly nothing on tape. You look at that, there was nothing on tape that made you feel like, okay, this is somebody we should keep. So I mean that cut makes sense to me. I didn't think he performed. And I mean, look, I thought there was a spot open, or it's not like we're carrying four great Macs, but he was not one of them from that film. So you look, Coach out in Edmonton might have his own opinions, and full credit to him, but not from what I saw.
And there's a door open now for Jonathan Jones or Jack Cassar if he can get onto the football field. We'll see how that goes on Friday. Let's turn our attention to this Friday's game and sort of some guys that we're really interested in seeing on the field. So what I gather from what Coach Dinwiddie has said to us this week is that the starters are going to play about a quarter and a half to a half. So somewhere in that second quarter, the starters are going to start getting pulled. I'm personally hoping, like if McLeod Bethel-Thompson is out there, and I expect him to be for the first quarter, I would love to see McLeod only play a quarter. And I would like to see Chad Kelly come in, leave all the rest of the starters in there, but just let's take a look at him with all those pieces, because I think that's an important evaluation moment. Because I think you've got to look and see if he looks really, really raw, and he might, with all the other starting pieces around him, then I think that tells you as an organization, we do need to get a vet in here. We need to pick up somebody. I guess, we need to pick up a guy like Antonio Pipkin. Maybe, not exactly that, but you may need somebody in there just in case, because like you said, I just don't know if he's ready yet. And that's your chance to see it. Put him in the second quarter with all the starters. If you're going to keep them in for most of the half anyway, see how he looks. He may look great, or he may look almost ready, but he may not.
Maybe. I think he'll probably look a little overwhelmed. But I agree. I would love to see positional positional strategy being applied here. I would bring, if it were me, I'd bring Macbeth out after a first down and then basically simulating an injury. Here you go. We're 1 minute in the second half and now you're 2nd and 5. Go get him. That's what I would do. I think that's useful to have the starters and to get dropped right into the middle of play and see how it goes. The same way you would if the quarterback got hurt. Quarterback's not necessarily going to get hurt at a nice, easy, clean time for you. So that's what I would do. I would have it be a really odd, kind of awkward starting time and distance, and take a look, because who cares? If this is for learning. So that's what I do, especially when you're playing Hamilton and you want vanilla of vanilla. That's what I would do it a couple of times. I would give them a different look, to drop them into different scenarios.
This is sort of a bit off topic, but just to go off on a little tangent here. Do you play this game differently because you've got a week 1 bye, or does that not factor in? Would you play this the same way as if you had a game week 1?
In terms of how long the starters play?
That and, just how you approach it in general. I guess I'm mostly talking about how long the starters play, but I guess what you do with it.
No, I don't think so. I would treat it the exact same way. I think you're treating it as a really fancy scrimmage where somebody's nice enough to pay for all the refs, and you're gonna be able to get a look at a couple of different things, and you're trying to get out healthy, and that's it. I wouldn't treat it, and especially when you're playing Hamilton, I'd have a 10-play playbook. Like, oh, that play didn't work. Like, who cares? I think you're just looking for, route running. You're looking for fundamentals from to analyze on film, and some down and distance stuff, maybe a couple of few high leverage moments, and that's about it. So yeah, it doesn't affect it to me. I wouldn't have my starters more than a half.
If we look at the offensive side of the ball first, so we talked about we're not. Can't imagine any quarterbacks are getting released for coming after this weekend, because they've only got 3 here, unless they magically pick up a few. It just doesn't seem likely.
Arbuckle.
Running backs are pretty low, fullbacks are pretty low. These guys are all probably either on the dress roster or the practice squad. There's not a lot of guys there. Receiver and O-line, though, there's some movement. Are you more interested in watching the receivers in terms of like cuts and who's going to make the roster? Are you more into O-line or receivers for this one?
Yeah, for me, it's probably receivers and defensive backs. I'm interested in seeing. I think there's still a fight at defensive back for a couple of guys, and receiver. I hope guys are. Hopefully everybody's healthy, and guys can get a real look, because I think there are a couple of guys that it's tough. Like you can't make the club from the tub.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those receivers. So it's so unusual at this stage. Like you want to try and keep Canadians if you can at pretty much any position. That's always your practice roster is filled with Canadians. But we look at some of these battles that are going on with some of the American receivers. DeMonte Coxey, Jamari Hester, AJ Richardson, Darius Roberson. These guys are, Isaiah Wright as well. These guys are all going to be fighting probably for 1 or 2 spots. I was actually surprised but happy that Darius Roberson made it past that first cut. I didn't think he was going to. I didn't see him out there a lot. I didn't feel like the coaches were giving him a ton of time, and they certainly weren't throwing the ball his way. And so to me, it looked early like they just, they'd already kind of made up their mind on him. But the fact that he's still in there is encouraging, because I do think he can be a player. I think he can be exciting in the return game. But then one of my favorite guys the entire offseason, AJ Richardson, has come to life as we kind of thought he would. He's a real player. His film is excellent, and he's got that Boise State tie, and that we knew was going to be magic. And he's had a great week leading up to this Hamilton game. So if I had to make the call right now, I would say that AJ Richardson makes the team, and I would feel he's really close to being on that dress roster too. But yeah, look out for Isaiah Wright because of that special teams ability. And Jamari Hester, who made that touchdown catch in the double blue game, he's gonna have to have a really good game. And same can be said for DeMonte Coxey. Like, they're gonna have to really perform in order to still be here next week.
Yeah, it's really a crazy deep room, and a lot of those guys are going to get cut. You're just not going to be able to keep 9 or 10 wide receivers.
And it speaks to the talent level of the Argos. Like, when you're making cuts and right away everybody is going through them and signing guys, and you're not signing anybody from anyone else's cuts, it tells you the quality of the roster. One of two things: either your coaching staff and management don't have any idea what they're doing, or you've got a really good roster. And I think it's the latter in this case. It's a lot of talent, and we've said that from the word go. I expect that to be the same in this next round of cuts, where you're going to see even more of these guys get picked up by other clubs, and probably only 1 or 2 guys get picked up by the Argos. I think maybe quarterback might be where they're looking, but other than that, yeah, I don't know. And O-line, again, I think it's the Americans, and this is the positional group that I am probably most interested in watching. I think we're set on our starting 5 with, we've got Dejon Allen at right tackle now, Isaiah Cage left tackle, Philip Blake and Darius Bladek as the guards. And for now, it's Justin Lawrence at center until Peter Nicastro is healthy. And then, after that, you're going to keep your Canadians. I'm pulling for Mushtaba Mary. He was a late cut last year. I'm hoping he can make the practice squad this year. That would be really cool to see. And then all the rookies in there, Braden Knoll, and Gregor McKellar, I just don't see movement from. So really, you're now looking at Martez Ivy in a battle, just to basically see if he can make the club. If they're going to, between he and Trevon Tate, are they going to keep one of those guys? Are they going to keep both of those guys? I think that's going to be an interesting one to watch. So anytime Tate, Ivy are on the field, I'm really going to pay attention to what they're doing, because I don't know if they both make this team. Let's cross to the defensive side of the ball. The D-line still, we're sort of desensitized to it because it was like this last year too. This D-line is still ridiculous, and they've still got 24 guys here on the D-line. And now you've got Jagger Davis, who has arrived. It was pretty cool seeing him in Argo Blue. And everyone else is starting to step up. You've got Coney Ely, who's ready to repeat what he did last year when he was healthy. Sean Oakman is ready to go, and then a couple guys that look great. Like I've been so impressed with Tracy, and I didn't know what to expect because he had retired. I think I came into Adrian Tracy was good a few years ago when he played with Hamilton, but after he retired, I thought, well, he wants to, come back. Maybe this is a coach wanting to give him another look or whatever else. He looks great out there. And you've got him and Shane Ray, Robbie Smith playing out of his head. I don't know how many guys that are looking at keeping, but there's going to be 5 guys that are probably cut from this group. And I just don't know where you do it. No,
it's a pretty talented group. I mean, Robbie Smith seems to be flashing a little bit as maybe their best outside rush guy. I'd love to see Ray look great in the first quarter. I think they're basically he's their guy on the outside. So I'd love to see him really stand out. To be honest, I haven't seen it yet. So that's what I'm looking for is can Shane Ray look like he should look like a starter out there. He should look like a difference maker. Because I think that's one that he's probably the one on the defensive line I have my eye on the most. And Polite, I'd like to see, he's got the resume. He's got the measurables. I'm curious to see what Polite might look like out there. Hopefully, he can get some real reps.
Yeah, there's so many. So I guess that'll be my focus on the defensive side of the ball, is watching that D line. So O line, D line for me, and you'll probably focus in on receivers and DBs, and we'll compare notes at the end, and of course have our post game podcast as well. Let's talk about the rest of the rest of the defense. Linebacker, are you like me where you just want Mwamba to get off the field as fast as possible, and Wynton McManus too, probably? Like, those two guys are locked in. We know they're the starters. You got Enoch at Mac again. Wynton McManus is obviously going to be the will. I don't even know if I want to see them play. They look so good in practice together. They're already in tune with each other. I'm just not sure it's worth even a few snaps. I don't even know if I would do it. I might just sit both those guys from the get-go, because you've got a job to do after that. They don't know who the backup Mac and the backup Will is going to be at this point. So I think Trevor Hoyt is probably in the mix for backup Will. But beyond that, it could be anybody. So why play McManus and Mwamba?
No, agreed. I wouldn't either. I would just let the guys go out there and rotate through a couple of guys at Mac, and see if anybody can hold their own, and then you've got yourself a backup. But I wouldn't either. Like, what he can do. He's a veteran guy. He doesn't need snaps. He doesn't need any of it. Let's just keep looking to see if any of the guys behind him, can be good for 10 snaps a game if you need them.
And in terms of the DBs, I'm excited to see the full group out there. It won't be the full group because Shaq Richardson's still not there, who we're expecting to play boundary half. But with Robertson Daniel probably filling in for him at boundary half, we know we're probably going to see Jamal Peters and Jalen Collins on the corners. You're going to see Deshaun Amos field half, and where else do we go? Royce Mechie obviously is our safety. And I guess with Chris Edwards' suspension coming up, I'm kind of expecting the way this is broken down. Initially, I was thinking Robertson Daniel as the Sam, and I think it's going to be D'Angelo Amos. I think that's where they're leaning, and so I wouldn't mind seeing him get starting time. I know Chris Edwards has been rolling with the ones, and I feel like now might be the time to turn to whoever that guy is going to be. And if it's D'Angelo Amos, then that's who should be out there with the ones this week, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Depends, right? I think as a coach, it's tough to. You have a guy who wants to play. He's really like desperate to play and is a blue flame guy. It's hard to not let him get his snaps while he can. So I understand that. Like, I think sometimes these choices aren't made in a vacuum. So it wouldn't surprise me if Chris Edwards basically just sort of needs to get a quarter of reps to keep him from tearing apart people at practice.
Is your mind made up on Tavares McFadden? Because mine is. I think he's on the team right now.
Yeah, I really like him. I like him. I like Carnell.
I want to see more from Carnell. I'm not 100% sold, and the only reason I'm not 100% sold on him is that with that, with all the injuries that the Hamilton defensive backfield went through last year, he really wasn't able to get a sniff. They had him moving around. I know they'd moved him from corner to field half, but he couldn't get off that practice roster. And that happens sometimes, and you get a different coaching staff, and suddenly, like, he looked amazing. He was the best defensive back on the field in the double blue game. Didn't shine quite as bright after that, but I want to see more from him. I really like to see a lot of playing time from him so we can properly evaluate him. Is he somebody that just had a great scrimmage and that stood out and has looked good in a few practices, or is he the real deal and he's changed and he's now a different player and he's the quality that should be out there on a dress roster? So I'm going to be watching him pretty closely too. Special teams is all set. That's another thing that I kind of don't want to. I really don't want to be in a situation where we're having to do too much kicking and punting. It went so well last week, and Beatty was just coming off the streak of being on fire last year. I just don't. I don't want that sort of mojo to end. So I kind of don't even want to see Boris Beatty attempt a field goal. Just
No.
like let's let that ride into the season.
No,
I just
let him, he's got to go kick. Kicking's all about reps.
I don't know. And just last week with Haggerty punting so beautifully, every punt was perfect. I don't even want to see him punt anymore. I don't know. Kicking and punting, it's so mental. I just feel like you can get thrown off so quickly. Like you've coached special teams.
On.
I haven't.
Yeah, they should play.
You know,
Come on, we're not going to bench the friggin' kickers.
No, I'm not saying bench him. I just let's just go for it on third down and
well,
keep
I'm
trying to get
okay
touchdowns.
with that to an extent. Like I think again, I'm in favor of positional, film. Like okay, we got 3rd and 3. What are we going to run? What's a 3rd and 3 play? That we like. Can we get a yard if we need it? And I think those tests are super important in exhibition. Go find out. Okay, O-line versus D-line. Can we get a yard when we need it right now? And it's like, nope. Okay, well then then you got to go back in the lab. So I do hope they are more aggressive on third down for sure. But get those guys their reps. But
well, if they do get reps, then this is what I want to see. I would like to see somebody other than Jake Reinhardt snapping, just because we know he can do it. He's the best. He's there. I want to see them try out. They've got like 5 guys on this roster who can long snap. Take your best one that isn't Reinhardt and throw him out there, and let's see what that looks like. And get somebody else holding the football that is not McLeod Bethel Thompson, so that we can see that. And they did that last week, but it wasn't Beatty kicking. I want someone else holding for Beatty, because it's going to have to happen. And so if he's going to be kicking, let's at least have that change. That's another thing that I want to see.
Yeah,
although it's
right.
minor.
He can't be holding more. Agreed. But I don't know. Sometimes as a coach, you're like, look, we don't want this to be a clown show out here.
JB and I will both be at the game. I'll be live tweeting. We will give you everything we can, and it's going to be a pretty late podcast after this game, because we got to wrap up post-game press conferences, drive back from Guelph, and then hit record. We may be into the wee hours of the morning by the time this one comes out. But you can start off your Saturday with a fresh cup of coffee in your X's and Argos mug and listen to our exhausted voices as we break down this preseason game for you.
Might get some spicy takes when I get tired.
Yeah, you think JB is crass and insensitive now. Wait till we're recording at 2 a.m.
At 1 in the morning. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am looking forward to the game. I can't wait for it to be Friday. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.